Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Beyond the Headlines. Tonight, we examine a debate that goes to the very heart of Nigeria's electoral credibility. Not simply what decisions are taken, but how institutions arrive at them, how clearly they are communicated, and how they are ultimately anchored in law. In the past several days, public attention has focused on the National Assembly's consideration of amendments to the Electoral Act. Central to that attention is the question of how election results are handled specifically, whether electronic transmission of results should be mandatory, and what the law currently provides for. This debate has unfolded alongside public demonstrations that we saw today at the National Assembly, reflecting concerns about transparency and trust in the electoral process. In response, lawmakers 12 noon. Votes and proceedings from the last sitting are yet to be adopted, and the bill is still going to be subject to harmonization between the two chambers of the National Assembly. So tonight's conversation is not about personalities or protest politics. It's about process. We're looking at the law, the technology, and public confidence, and how democratic institutions manage disagreement while maintaining legitimacy, because we're going to need that as we count down to 2027. Joining me this evening are two stakeholders at the center of this development. In our Abuja studio, we're expecting Wilfred Ifoga, who's INEC's Deputy Director of Information and Publicity. He's representing the Electoral Management Institution at the Center of Implementation. I see he's there now. Also joining us via Zoom is Paul James, an Elections and Policy Development Specialist who has raised concerns about the implications of the amendment for transparency and public trust. Gentlemen, let's go beyond the headline. Let me begin with INEC. Mr. Ifoga, for viewers following this very closely, perhaps you want to help us understand what the Electoral Act currently provides for regarding the handling of election results and what exactly is being amended at this stage.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Actually, right now, what the Electoral Acts provide for the management of results, you have different stages in the process of election, managing our results. We have at the polling unit, we have the collation point, depending on the constituency. We have at the local government level as well, then the state constituency. Then, like I said, depending on the kind of election, if you have the National Assembly elections, you have at the federal constituency level, the senatorial level, and of course, before you now get to the presidential level. So depending on the stage, we have different processes and the different result management style that we use. So at the polling unit, after the presiding officers, they are done with the election at that point, the result is calculated and the prescribed form, which we normally refer to as the EC8A, the result is entered into that form. And thereafter, because of the introduction of technology in the result management form, we have what we call the upload of this same result, which is scanned and uploaded on the IREF portal. That's the upload that we do. And that is also taken to the collation center where the collation officer will collate that same result, and other units that are under that particular registration area, it's collated. So depending on the stage of the election, the result is calculated, and until it gets to the final point where a return is made. That's what we do right now, according to the electoral framework that we have for the election, for the management of results.
Mr. Ifoga, the expectation is that whatever is uploaded on IREF tallies with the eventual result that is being announced. Has that been the case, especially when you consider 2023 elections?
Okay, let me just clear one thing here. At the polling unit level, remember the presiding officer, which is the least position of the for the election officials that are working. They are in direct contact with the ballot papers, how they have done the sorting and everything. Remember, at that same level too, it also goes to also tell us what happened at the polling unit. So there might be issues of overvoting, probably maybe during the sorting and counting of this ballot, they were not properly done, and also the accredited voters for that election. At times, the figures not properly entered. So you find out that most times, if the presiding officer has not done that properly, At the collation point, the result will also be presented. Thereafter, the collation officer will insist on seeing what the beavers has recorded. So based on that, they're able to do an audit of what really happened. And, so it can happen that the result that is uploaded at the polling units before approaching the collation center is quite different from the result that is finally collated. So therefore, you might see discrepancies between what was uploaded on the beavers and what was actually calculated at the collation point.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that it is not automatic that everything uploaded on IREV is accurate until collation is done,
exactly,
where some of these issues can be raised. All right. Let me bring Mr. James into this conversation. You know that much of the public debate have turned on language, but legally and institutionally, what is the distinction, the way you understand it, between electronic transmission of results and transfer of results? And why does that distinction matter as we count down to 2027?
Very clear. It's about semantic here. I recall there was a time that INEC was put on the spot regarding this issue, and that actually first came from INEC. INEC said what it did was upload and not transfer or transmission of results. So you keep hearing a lot of these ambiguities in our electoral discourse in Nigeria. I recall in 2019, when INEC first piloted this idea of uploads, and then when PDP specifically requested that INEC should open up a server, INEC then said what it was doing was sort of trying to test its equipment ahead of subsequent election. And then when other election happened and the citizen asked INEC, especially when people started seeing discrepancies between what was uploaded and what was announced at the polling unit, at that point in time, INEC made the clarification what it did was not transmission, was not transfer. What it simply did was to upload the Form EC8A as they were received from the individual polling station. So, like I said, it's just about semantic here, but Nigerians want to move beyond the semantic, that we should have a language that is very clear to the law, a language also that is unambiguous, that every Nigerian will understand.
And I understand that, Mr. James, but my question really is, what do these proponents, those who want this amendment, what do they mean by transmission of results?
So the transmission in this context is similar to what exists presently. What INEC does at the end of every election is to transfer the Form EC8A from the polling units to the INEC election results viewing portal. What we want at this point is to make that law, to codify that in our electoral instrument, so that that ambiguity will be out of the line. If you recall what happened after the 2023 election, first 2023 election, INEC's documents, INEC guidelines then specified that INEC was going to do transfer. But when this issue went to the Supreme Court, at that point, the Supreme Court did not recognize the subsidiary legislation that INEC had done. Now, whatever is happening presently is based on the advice of the Supreme Court from that election, that this should now be mainstreamed into the electoral law, so that in the future you avoid all of these ambiguities. That is simply why citizens are calling for now the need to have this electronic transmission as it is in the electoral guideline, as simple as it is. It is not a bogus language. What it simply means is that at the end of the election, INEC should send the results to the election viewing portal. Don't forget, the argument is not just about even the electronic transmission of the results. Beyond that also, there is also the part that now will compel INEC official or INEC adult staff to ensure that the results that are uploaded on the INEC server are same as the one that are now collated at the polling unit level.
And you heard the INEC spokesperson saying that that is practically impossible, because at the point of collation, you may now find out that there are errors, especially if the number of votes is now more than the number of accredited voters in that area. But precisely,
well,
let us get...
That is also where you want to call for due diligence.
Okay.
The INEC officials that are managing this process are all graduates. At least to some level, they should know how to do computation, basic computation. And besides, this is not just an INEC affair alone. There will be party agents, there will be observers, there will be other voters at the polling unit to ensure that INEC records the correct thing. After recording the correct information at the polling unit level, that is when INEC get to upload online. Simply what we are asking is that the one uploaded online should match the hard copy at the polling unit level. It is not too much to ask. No ambiguity about this request from citizens.
Mr. Ifoge, interesting development here. The phrase real time, we understand, was removed from the proposed amendment. We probably will wait to hear from the Senate tomorrow because there are about 3 different versions as to the position of the Senate on this matter. But from a legislative standpoint, I'm wondering what you consider the practical or legal effect removing that phrase really have. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, INEC eventually uploaded all the 2023 presidential elections on IREV, right? Perhaps it took some time.
Yes.
So what is different this time based on the requests, from the civil society? Do you think INEC has the capacity to upload this in real time?
Well, asking me if INEC has the capacity to upload this in real time is not something I can say right now. But then, if the enabling law is provided, and probably, INEC is not in this alone. There are secondary providers that actually collaborate with the Commission to ensure most of these things are carried out. They are not actually domiciled in the Commission. So there has to be discussion. There has to be a robust discussion on how to achieve this particular, because what we've been trying to see here in terms of the result management, if for those who have been following our processes, like at the collation level, there's what the Commission deploy, where we have the collation support and result verification system. This is one point where the results, even while the collation officer is calculating the results, the system is also deployed to assist the collation officer to ensure that the calculation is error-free. And the Commission is also looking at that even at the polling unit level to ensure that even the result uploaded at the polling unit level is error-free before it is uploaded, so that there will be no discrepancies when you get to the collation point. So in terms of the technology deployment to ensure that there's real-time transmission of results, well, there are many factors that support that. And well, for those already agitating for it and the various views and things like that, well, I can't say. So whatever they come up with, if the Commission is empowered to do that, we'll look towards ensuring we're able to do that.
Are you saying that INEC, as we speak, doesn't have an interest in this ongoing development? Isn't there something the Commission wants, as an amendment to this act? Okay,
what I can say here, INEC is an election management body. There are different election management bodies in the world, and they have their guidelines in terms of a legal framework and things like that. It's not like what we have that we are operating here in Nigeria is not good enough, but somehow people still try to subvert these laws that we have. So in order to ensure it is it cannot be manipulated, that's why we are still coming up, or people are agitating, oh, let it be like this, let it be like this. So for us in the Commission, whatever the law says that we'll work with, that's what we'll work with.
You heard Mr. James say that having results on IREV tally with the collated results and the one INEC eventually announces isn't rocket science, that due diligence can be done even at polling units level. Yes. How do you respond to that?
Okay, yes, I totally agree with him in terms of ensuring that the personnel we recruit, like he did mention, in terms of our recruitment for ad hoc staff, especially at the polling unit level, we have this MOU with the NYC, and because at least for every NYC personnel we use, they are all graduates, so it's expected that they have the minimum level of education for them to be able to understand what we do. But if you look at that, even at the collation level where we do employ even lecturers and things like that, at times because of the tension and pressure and things like that, they make these mistakes. So the thing that's why, like we said, at the collation level, we already have a mechanism to help them to ensure that their calculation is correct and error-free. So at the polling unit level, fine. we do train them and retrain them to ensure that they do this thing properly. So all we ask is that every stakeholder in the process, they do their part so that whoever the official is that we have deployed, they are given the necessary cooperation so that they can calculate it very well. Like we said, the Commission is also developing a system to ensure that at the polling unit level, the calculation is error-free as well before it is uploaded on the IREV.
Mr. James, based on Supreme Court rulings arising from the last presidential election, what guidance did the courts provide on electronic transmission and its legal footing, and how is this amendment trying to address that?
What the court simply did at that point was first to not recognize the INEC guidelines, because according to the court, it was a subsidiary legislation. The court at that point advised that if we want this in our elections, then it should be part of the Electoral Act. And to be very clear, this request, as it is, first emanated from INEC. It was not a concoction by the citizens, but rather part of the reform proposal that INEC has submitted to the National Assembly. And also in their wisdom, the two houses of the National Assembly both felt that this is really a progressive provision to have in our electoral law. Just to be clear, that this was both in the proposal that was passed by the lower house and also the proposal by the Senate. It was just at the review, the second review that had happened at the Senate, that they began to bring up all the semantics around it. It was very clear, unambiguous, like I keep saying, to have transmission in our electoral legal framework, whether real-time or not real-time. The idea is, as it exists currently, at the end of every election, INEC does upload to its INEC election results being portal with a very good success rate, averaging 95, 97%. So if we have that, can we just make that official? Can we make that into our law? That is the request.
The law now, clause 16 subsection 3, what we heard from the Senate last week is that it is adopting the existing provision of the Electoral Act. And what it says is that the presiding officer shall transfer the results, including the total number of accredited voters and the results of the ballot, in a manner as prescribed by the Commission. Are you saying that as this law is currently constituted, it is not recognized? I mean, IREV is still not recognized, even if we drive the case to the Supreme Court? Mr. James.
Nifemi, the request is to see how you can limit human interference in the process.
Okay.
Limiting human interference is also why even INEC said, can we have all of these processes from after the collation to the upload, can we have it in the law? Now, saying a manner to be determined by the INEC officials, now you're now subjecting it to their own preference. Can we make it very clear? Can the law be very explicit? At the end of the election, the Form EC88 from the polling unit should be uploaded to INEC election results viewing portal. Simple.
So you know the way it is now. Let me return to the INEC spokesperson who's also joined this conversation, Mr. Ifoga. The way IREV works currently is that what we see are pictures of results from each polling unit, and it would take a sophisticated form of computation to be able to put all of these results together. Why haven't we improved on IREV to the point where at one glance we can just tell how each party is performing in, say, a presidential election? Why are we posting just pictures? Is it a function of capacity or laws?
Okay, I get your point now. So what's like the IREV, like this, is just a result viewing portal. Remember, there is something we do at every polling unit. At the end of the election at that unit, there is a form, we call the form EC60E. Actually, that form is an enlarged form of the result sheet for that polling unit. Because during the point of calculating the results and getting the figures for each party that participated in the election, you know, not everyone, especially the voters, will have the opportunity of seeing what is on the result sheet. So at the end of that election, the presiding officer will now paste everything recorded on the ECAT is now written on the larger form, which is called the 60E, and is posted on the wall of that polling unit so that everyone that is there who is interested to see the results can have a glance at what happened. So the commission has actually gone further to say, okay, fine, you might not have the opportunity of being in that area, and because maybe as a stakeholder, you want to know how things went about other polling units. So that is how the INEC result viewing portal came about. So whether you are in Nigeria, you are in diaspora, you can actually monitor how the results are dropping in. And you view the result just like, even if you were not there, but you can see the result sheet, the way it looked like, how it was computed and everything. So that's what the commission did by actually having that, the INEC result viewing portal. Like from what you said now, you are looking at an analysis way where, for example, now as the results are coming in, you can easily click on a bar or a subhead or menu for you to see how the results are trickling, how the figures are counting and things like that. No, we have not done that. It's not like we can't do it, but then it's something we hope to look for, because if not for the purpose of the election, at least for the purpose of research and trying to review how things go. But somehow we know people do have various situation rooms where from what is posted on the result viewing portal, they're able to do this computation on their own. So I think, well, Commission will look towards that, and there are departments saddled with that responsibility where they can easily do it. And because for now, you know, only the Commission has the power and the mandate to announce officially results. So that is why we look at some of these things and we have the gaps there so that the results are properly verified before it is published for people to see.
They say about 6.2 million voters were disenfranchised in 2023 because they couldn't get access to PVCs. How's INEC reacting to the possibility of people just downloading these PVCs? They are registered already. You have their biometrics. Why are you disenfranchising millions of Nigerians just because they cannot physically collect, you know, these cards?
Okay, well, the provision of the law still remains that Section 47 provides, that's Electoral Act 2022, Section 40 provides that every voter has to come with their voter card. And in this case, we have the permanent voters card issued to eligible voters. So that aspect of the law during the election has
I understand the law, Mr. Ifoga. What I'm trying to say...
Yes, you're talking about those...
No. What I'm even asking is, do you think downloading these things personally in any way poses any significant challenge to the integrity of our election?
Okay, well, these are all suggestions and recommendations. I know definitely for us in the Commission too, we are looking for ways to ensure that registering, getting your information integrated, and you getting your voter card, we are looking for a way to make it seamless by not also infringing on the legal framework as well. So, well, let's see what happens in the future.
All right, Mr. James, we have to go now. The Senate reconvenes in an emergency session tomorrow. We're also expecting to see some form of harmonization process. Some of civil society organizations that you represent seem quite comfortable with the amendment done at the House of Reps. But what key decisions should Nigerians be watching for in the coming days?
One, we need the clarity of the law, especially for INEC. INEC needs to make an announcement very soon. I will assume that INEC will rely on the existing electoral legal framework to make an announcement to share notice of elections with Nigeria. So we want the National Assembly to be very clear, because now they're supposed to go for conference. Conference will take like a month and all of that. If we want to work with the existing legislation, let that be very clear from tomorrow so that INEC will proceed. If we want to go also through this amendment, then we also need to talk about reviewing the timelines. We will not go with the idea of 180 days just to satisfy the excesses of politicians. Even INEC was one that requested for this 360 days because, one, it allowed them to plan better for logistics. We didn't have election postponement in 2023 because we thought to some extent logistics was managed better. Security will also need this time for its own planning, even the political parties itself. So I think that's another area that they need to reconsider. The timeline for INEC have to be as it is, 360 days, for INEC to effectively plan ahead of the next election.
Paul James, Elections Policy Development Specialist, Wilfred Ifoga, INEC's Deputy Director of Information and Publicity. Gentlemen, thank you so much for talking to us on the program this